Yeah, cool. So I guess recording has started. So hi guys, I'm Anand. I've been joined here by Ketan and Rakesh as well, who are from GDSC and Technical Council. And this is the second session for the 30 days of Google Cloud program, where we'll be going over some of the challenge labs that are present in the tracks, and also taking some Q&As if you guys have any questions, clarifications regarding the entire process. Right. So, in this lab, so what we planned for this week was we wanted to complete two skill badges in each track. So last week we completed the getting started skill badge, and this week we wanted to complete two in each track, which is 2 and 3 and 2 and 3 over here as well. So what I've noticed is that the challenge labs in the data science and machine learning track is actually a lot more straightforward than the cloud engineering track. So if I just go to say the BigQuery lab and take a look at the challenge lab, you'll be able to see that most of the challenges or the tasks that are present over here are just like simple SQL statements. On the other lab, it's just things which you have already done in the previous labs. It'll be the same thing completely. But that is not the case, as I mentioned in the cloud engineering track, where sometimes the challenge labs get a bit tricky. So we'll be going over the cloud engineering labs as well in detail. And for the machine learning track, we'll just skim over the challenge labs and how we can solve them. And if there are any specific doubts, I'll be happy to solve them as well. Right. So I guess we'll get started with the performing foundational infrastructure tasks in Google Cloud Lab. And this quest or skill badge is more of a continuation of the previous skill badge, which is getting started, create and manage cloud resources. While there, you would have dealt a lot with instances of Kubernetes clusters and so on. In the foundational infrastructure with Google Cloud skill badge, you'll be learning about the rest of the components that are available in Google Cloud, which is things like storage buckets, things like functions as a service. That is, they call it cloud functions, pub sub, you know, what are they called? Publisher subscription. It's a cloud messaging service, and also things like identity management and so on. So over here, this I am quick start. It's also a part of the previous quest, so you wouldn't have to do that lab, but other labs you'll probably have to do. And yeah, so in this quest, actually, you don't have to touch the command line at all. As shown over here, you can actually do everything which is there as a part of this quest, and also the challenge lab from the console itself directly. I mean the cloud console itself directly, and I guess we can just start with that. Go for the lab itself and go over the different tasks that are present. So let me just start the lab and verification. Yeah, might take a bit. What a robot. Okay, that's good to know that I haven't been replaced by a bot yet, so we can get started with the lab itself. So here they have given you two usernames and a single password for both of them. The second username is your cloud engineer account or the dummy account that you'll be managing permissions, etc. for. And the first account is actually the account of the project owner, which will have all of the permissions. So for now, it is sufficient if you just log in with the project owner's account, and you can deal with the second account later. That is not an issue. You don't actually even need to log into the account itself. So if we just log into this account, perform all of the formalities, something over here. Yeah, so while that happens, again, there are some standards that these labs want you to perform, and the labs will fail if you don't do as they say, which is like create resources in this US East 1 region, US East 1B zone, etc. And they're like use VPCs for the project, use naming conventions, so on and on, F1 micro and so on. But this will be a pretty simple task again at the end of the day. So we can get started. First, they're asking us to create a bucket, which is just going to cloud storage. Yeah, cloud storage over here, going to browser, and let me just copy the project ID for the name of the bucket. And if I click on, you can either click on create bucket here or in the top with the 3 dots. And if I create a bucket, you'll need a unique name over here, which is why I'm using the name of the project, which is unique. And if I click continue, you can pick the region that you want, which they have told us to use US East 1 region. So if I use that, put it in US East 1, and everything else we can leave as it is in the default settings, and we can create the bucket. And this should be pretty simple. And once the bucket is created, you can check your progress and it says it's completed. So next, they have just asked us to create a pub subtopic, which again, we can just go to over here under big data, pub subtopics. Once you go there, there'll be a big button which says create a pub subtopic. And yeah, if you create this, you can enter any topic ID that you want. What's the name of this company? Yeah, you can call it, say, Julie topic, right? And everything else we can leave at default again. For this, there's not much. And once we create this topic, we will be able to so this topic has been created, and that's about everything that we need to do for this task. We can check the progress over here and it says assessment complete. So finally, what we have to do is we'll need to link this pub subtopic and the bucket that we just created. We can use a cloud function to, run a function whenever an image is uploaded to the bucket that we have. And once that, function is uploaded, you can use this pub subtopic to publish a message to that topic that the image has been uploaded. So here they're giving us the code for the cloud function that we have to use. And if we see over here, we can see that on finish, what it does is it takes a function and it publishes the file name of whatever file that it has created into the pub subtopic and shows it there, and that's about it. So if we go click on create function, and so we can name it whatever we want. Let's just call it function 1, and the region they told us to change it to US East 1 as usual. And so the trigger type, they have told us to use cloud storage as a trigger, so we'll be changing to that. And the event type would be to so essentially we want to execute the function every time an object is created. So we'll have to change the event type to finalize create, and the bucket we can browse to the one that we just created, which is this, and select. And yeah, so we can just save this. All of these settings we can leave at defaults. There is no issue over there. And over here they have given us a code for the function itself, which we can copy paste. And over here they have told us to change the topic ID to the topic ID to the one that we had created, which was Julie-topic, if I'm not wrong. So we can just replace that over here. So Julie-topic, right? And once you do this, it should be fine. They haven't told us anything else. Finally, we also have to, it just uses some dependencies like cloud pub sub, cloud storage, and so on. So all of these we can add to the package.json. And finally, we have to set the entry point to thumbnail, which is the name of the function in this file. Yeah, so exports to thumbnail. Yeah. So if we just set it to thumbnail, we'll be done. And that's about it. So we can just click on deploy, and while this function creates, we can actually download an image to be used along with the function. They have suggested that we use this image, so we can just use that. So if we go there and say save this image as JPEG. Wait. Let's wait for the function to be created, and once the function is created, we can upload this map.jpg to the bucket, and once we upload, we'll be able to see that the cloud function executes. And once the cloud function executes, what it does is it, over here you can see that the function, it does a bit of processing and converts that image into a 64 by 64 thumbnail, and that is again stored in the same bucket that we uploaded to. So we'll be able to see that once the function gets created. Let me just refresh this a few times for this to get created. So what a cloud function is it's the highest level of abstraction that Google Cloud provides. So in the last quest, we saw things like instances where you'll have to set up everything on your own. And on the next level would be something like your Kubernetes clusters, where you can deploy the containers itself on the cloud. So that can be anything, any OS you want, any application you're running on it. A bit higher level of abstraction would be something like your Google App Engine. I don't think we have visited that yet in this 30 days of clouds, but what App Engine is it's a service which can take your Node.js applications or your Python applications and run those applications itself. And they will take care of things like scaling the application, etc., by themselves, and you don't have to do much. And even on top of that, a level of additional abstraction is something like cloud functions that you see over here, where you do nothing except just, copy paste some code or enter some code into the file, and the cloud will take care of everything from scaling your code, running your code, allotting machines to the code, having a Node.js runtime, etc. The cloud will take care of everything for you and make sure that your life is easy. So this usually takes a while. Yeah. So now that this function is done, we can just go to the bucket that we created. So cloud storage browser. And yeah, so this was the bucket we created, which the same name as our project. And over here, if we upload our map.jpg, once it gets uploaded, we should be, seeing the cloud function get called. So if I just refresh this after like 10 seconds or so, yeah, you can see that file called map.64x64 thumbnail.jpg is created, and this was created by the cloud function automatically based on the trigger that we set, and you can, see that this has been executed properly. So you can click on check my progress, and this should show that your assessment has been completed, showing that, we have finished that task. And finally, we have to remove someone's access to our project, which is the second user ID that we were given, which is this 04015. We don't really have to log into that account at all. And yeah, so if I go to I am an admin and go to we'll be able to see the account that is there, which has, I guess, viewer permissions right now, the 015 account. I can just edit the principal, remove the role, and save. And once we do this, it should, like, I guess in one of, it doesn't say over here, but in one of the labs, they have told us that it might take up to 80 seconds to actually verify, propagate across Google Cloud that an IAM change has happened. So you might have to wait for that, but I think we can just click on check my progress. Yeah. And if it says assessment has been completed, then score would change. And that's about it for this challenge lab. It's pretty straightforward, and we can end the lab right here to, finish the lab, and we have all of the things that we need to do. So that's about it for this lab, which is the perform foundational infrastructure tasks in Google Cloud Lab. So yeah, so do you guys have any questions regarding this, or can we move on to the next one, which is actually slightly more challenging than this one? The setup and configure cloud environment. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll take that as a no, and we can proceed to the next lab. So this setup and configure cloud environment is actually a really good quest. And what this helps you to do is it helps you do everything from how networking works in Google Cloud, how you can create, different VPC networks and VPC as in virtual private cloud networks. And you can also learn about things like Cloud SQL and how you manage your data and so on in this lab. And so over here, especially these two quests, the 7 credit quests over here are really good, which is multiple VPC networks, and managing deployments using Kubernetes engine. Both of these quests are really good, and if you're going to be trying these quests, I would actually recommend you reading everything which is present over there, so that you can learn a lot you doing these two quests alone itself. So yeah, so the last quest was just 10 credits, I guess, and this quest is 26, which is because it's a longer and more challenging quest at the end of the day. And yeah, so again, you'll have a challenge lab for the same, and we can go over the lab as well. Right, so let's just get started with the lab. Like, there's not much to do. And for this lab, unlike the last one, you will be having to touch the cloud, touch your console a bit, either the Cloud Shell or a local Gcloud SDK that you have installed. I'll be using my local Gcloud SDK, but you can use the Cloud Shell again. It's up to you to decide what you want to use, and you can do this lab as well. So yeah, so let's just wait for this thing to set up. I think it'll take a minute. Yeah, so it will take a minute to set up the lab, and once you have done that, there are a few things that you'll have to do, obviously, for the Google Cloud Shell. Let me just visualize it. So, Cloud, is any account logged in? So, let me just revoke the previous accounts that have been logged in. Meanwhile, that's fine. While that thing sets up, so that we can prepare for the next account that that we have to sign into. Yeah, so now I guess we have an empty slate to log in and figure out what account that we want to log into and what project that we want to run. And we'll be getting those details once this lab is provisioned. And so while that happens, oh, okay, it happened, great. So again, we have two accounts over here. The first account is the one you want to sign into, which has all of the permissions for the lab itself. And the second account will mostly just be a viewer that you'll have to perform some operations on in the end. I think that's the last task of the lab. So if I just open this in a new window, yeah, and log into this account. Yeah, so once this is complete, we can actually log into our Google Cloud SDK, or you can open your Cloud Shell by pressing this button over here. I'll be using the SDK, so gcloud or login. And once we have logged in, this will open in Chrome, but since I'm using an incognito tab, I'll just copy paste this. And disable this account, allow. Yep, so our account has been logged in and we are logged into the SDK. And next we'll have to set the project that we are working on. So these two steps, login and set project, are done in advance for you. If you're using Cloud Shell, you wouldn't have to do it, but project and the project ID. So yeah, so these two have been set for us. And finally, you'll also have to do a few more things. Here again, there is a restriction on the region and the zone that you want to work in. So we can set those in the configuration as well, so that we don't have to deal with it later. So we can do config set compute/region. This is one. And the zone is US East 1B, which I guess is Iowa. I'm not sure. So let's just set that as well. Yeah, so once this has been set up, again, so in this lab, we'll have to do a few things. So we'll have to create a development VPC with 3 subnets. We'll have to create a production VPC with 3 subnets. We'll have to create a Bastion that is connected to both VPCs. What a Bastion is it's essentially a virtual machine or an instance which is connected to these two VPCs, and you can SSH into the Bastion from any network on the internet, that is from your computer, etc. And if you want to say access a machine on any of these other subnets, you'll have to first SSH into this Bastion computer, and from here you'll be able to SSH into other network computers. So what this does is it's an essential, it's an extra layer of security when it comes to your networks, and so that it's not accessible from outside, which is what you want. And then they're asking us to create a Cloud SQL instance and prepare the WordPress environment, which is a few DB statements which they have provided us again. And then we'll have to create a Kubernetes cluster for development of WordPress. We'll have to then deploy WordPress on, the cluster. Finally, we'll have to enable monitoring, for the cluster via this stack driver. And then we'll have to provide access for an additional engineer. So we disabled access the last time we did this, and this time we'll have to enable access for the person, for the second user that has been provided to us. So yeah, so I guess we can get started. Here's a diagram of what we essentially have to do. There's a dev VPC with two network subnetworks. There's a prod VPC with two subnetworks, and then yeah, so that's about it. There's a load balancer, there's a compute engine, and so on. So yeah, so first we'll have to create the VPCs. Again, I would recommend having Cloud Sdk's reference open right here, so that you can figure out what command that you need to type. So first, to create the VPC itself, we'll have to type Cloud compute networks, and same format as everything else, create, and the name of the network that we want to create, which is dev VPC. And once we create that, we'll also have to set the subnet mode. So when we create a network over here, so if I just go to compute networks, create, by default the subnet mode is auto. So what auto does is it creates subnet networks by itself, one for every region, if I'm not wrong, and that is something that we don't want, right? So auto is the recommended one, but for us we want exactly two subnets, so we'll be using custom. So subnet mode, and we'll be setting it as custom. So what did okay, I misspelled. Okay, sorry. So yeah, so we'll have to set that. And once this network is created, we'll be able to create subnets with the IP address ranges. So again, it's a similar command. So gcloud compute networks subnets create, and the name of the subnet, which is within dev WordPress. And let's just move to the next line so that we don't have any spelling errors. And so here we'll have to specify the network that it's attached to, which is Griffin Dev VPC. Yeah. So we'll do network, the name of the network. Then we'll also have to specify the IP address range, which is this 192.168.16.0. This 20 indicates that the first 20 bits of the IP address is fixed, and everything after the 20th bit can be changed by is part of the subnetwork. So yeah, so we can put it as range and the value that they have provided us, and yeah, so that would be all the arguments that we'll have to supply. So we can just run this command to create the subnetwork. This can take a while, I guess. Like, we can, if we want, we can write the commands to create the other 4 subnetworks as well, but it's fine. So yeah. So for the next one, I guess it's dev management, which is everything the same except the IP changes to 0.32.0 and the name changes to dev mgmt, right? And we can create this as well. Yeah, so once this is created, we can check the progress to see if we have done everything correctly, and we have. So similar to the dev, we'll also be executing the same commands just for the prod VPCs. So I think we can just go up, edit the command itself. So from Griffin dev, we'll change it to Griffin prod and subnet mode custom, right? And over here, the IP address again. So we are going in multiples of 16. So it was 16, 32, 48, then 64. So yeah. So if we just go for 48 for the prod WordPress, which is attached to the prod VPC. So execute this command. Yeah, so and finally we'll have to change this to 64 for prod mgmt, which we can do by changing the name, attaching it to the same network. And once this is done, we'll be done with task 2 as well. Task 1 and task 2 are pretty much the same. And finally, we can get to creating the Bastion host, which is a machine that we want to connect to both the networks. So yeah. So once we do this, we can check progress over here, and it says assessment complete. So now what we'll have to do is we'll have to create the Bastion host machine. So for this, we'll have to create a VM first. And to do that, we'll use the same command as the previous, module 1's challenge lab, which is compute instances create. So compute instances create, we can call it anything we want. Let's call it Griffin Bastion, right? So the next line. Yeah, so we'll have to attach this to 2 network interfaces. So first one would be the dev management and the prod management, right? So which is what they have told us over here. So what we'll do is we'll use this flag called network interface, and then we can specify a key value pair as the subnet that we want. So we'll use network interface subnet equal to Griffin dev management, and we'll do network interface subnet equal to Griffin prod management. So what this does is it ensures that it is connected to both the subnets, both the network interfaces, and that it's able to access all of the machines on the network itself. So next we'll have to, specify the machine type as usual as F1 micro, which is what they have provided us. So machine F1 micro, and Yeah, so I guess that would be all of the commands, right? So they haven't told us to do anything else special. So we can create the compute instance with this set of what? Oh, okay. Have I misspelled this? Oh yeah, I put submit over it. Sorry. Yeah, so if you specify the right command, unlike me, you'll be able to create the machine properly. I'll again be posting all of the commands as well as the recording once the session is done, so no issues. So once we create this instance, we'll also have to do a few things. We'll have to add a firewall rule so that port 22 is open so that we can SSH into the host. So how we would know this is they have told us to make sure that we can SSH into the host. So SSH's default port is 22, that you'll have to know. Otherwise you can just Google SSH port, yeah, SSH port number, and you'll know that 22 is the default port number for SSH. So we'll have to open that port alone. So before we do that, we'll need to make sure that there's a way to target this specific compute instance alone. So there are two ways. First is like last week, we can add a tag, network tag to this in Google Cloud. And using the network tag, so if you want to add a network tag, you'll have to add it while creating the instance itself. So we can do that, but we haven't done that. But there's another approach. What that is every instance that you create, yeah, in Google Cloud, it can be an instance, it can be something like an instance group, it can be a cluster, anything, has something called a service account. What it is it's a specific email ID that is created just for that machine. And whenever the request or whenever you want to target that particular machine alone, you can use that service account to figure out what you want to do. So how do we know what the service account is? First, you can go to your Cloud Console and see what the service account is. So if you go to say compute engine VM instances, here you will be able to see the instance right over here and see what the service account is. Yeah, so if I say click on Griffin Bastion, it will, yeah, if I just scroll down, yeah, here it tells me what the service account email ID is for this. There's another way. There's a command called gcloud compute instances describe. And now if you give the name of the instance that you want to describe, it will give you all of the information regarding the instance itself, which is basically this page, but in a terminal form. And yeah, as you can see, it says what device it is, what kind of machine it is, and so on. And over here also, you'll be able to get the same email ID which was specified there, which is the service account email ID. So now what we want to do is we want to add firewall rules so that you can SSH to the host. So how do we do that? We would use the again, you can just go over here, see what command you want to use, which is firewall rules create. So you'll do gcloud compute firewall rules create, and we can call it whatever we want. So say we call it Griffin Bastion dev firewall. So since it's connected to two networks, you'll actually have to create two different firewalls for the same machine so that it's properly connected. So over here, we'll be using the service account that email that we got. Yeah, so we can do target service account and the email ID that we just copied. And then what we'll have to do is we'll need to specify what port we need to allow. So yeah, so since it's SSH, we know that it's 22. So you'll put allow, and it's a TCP connection. SSH doesn't use UDP, and we'll be allowing that. Finally, we can also set something called priority. What a priority is it's basically the lower the priority value, the higher the first, the order in which the firewall rules get evaluated is the priority. So we'll just set a low priority for now, just in case, so that our firewall rule actually gets accepted. You can play around with this value if you want to see what gets accepted, or if you actually see all of the rules that are listed, you can see what value you want to use. And finally, we also need to mention the network that this firewall applies to, which in our case is the Griffin dev management account, because we are naming, yeah, so we'll need one for each network, and we are naming this Griffin Bastion dev firewall. So let's just put it to Griffin dev management. So if we just execute this command, okay, target service accounts is included again. So if you need the exact, no, did I set the region? Gcloud config get value compute region. This. Okay, for some reason it is not able to recognize the region and the zone that have been set, because I guess it goes to global over here. So we can set the region. Again, we can just specify the region as US is 1. I think that should fix the command. No. Oh, okay. Never mind. The network name should be the Griffin Dev VPC and not the subnet's name. I am sorry, which is the issue over here. So yeah, we can create the dev firewall as well as the prod firewall, and let me just change the name as well. And if we create both firewalls, you'll be able to access the Bastion from outside, so which is what we want. And from the Bastion, you'll obviously be able to access all of the internal machines, because their firewalls will be open. So we can just check progress for that, and yeah, so that works. The next task is to create a Cloud SQL instance. So this one is a bit tricky, because if you use a certain Cloud SQL name and if you make a mistake in that, you will not be able to reuse the same name again for 1 week. But our lab only lasts for 1 hour, so your entire lab will crash. So what I recommend is you use the slower but easier method of the Cloud Console itself for creating the Cloud SQL instance. So it's pretty simple. So like just go to navigation menu, SQL, and over here we can just create an instance. We need a MySQL instance as it is shown over here, and we need to call the instance Griffin dev db, right? And over here I'm just using your random password, so ABCD1234, right? And yeah, apart from this, we want to make sure that the zone is US East 1. So this, if you're doing this in command line, the command would be gcloud sql whatever create. Yeah, so it's not a compute command, so the zone that you set in config will not work. You'll have to specify it manually, so make sure you don't forget that if you're doing it in the command line. But over here we can just set it to US East 1, South Carolina, and yeah, so that's about it. So everything else, I think we can leave it at the default, and we can just create an instance that we want, right? And this can take a while to get provisioned, because Cloud SQL, again, it's an expensive operation, because Google actually, when you create a Cloud SQL, it has to provision a lot of resources. It needs to make sure that your DB is scalable in the long run and so on. So if you would know, there are like two broad, 1 second, I'm getting a call. Yeah, sorry, I'm back. I just got a call and right. So essentially, there are two kinds of databases. One is the SQL database that you have, and there's a NoSQL database that you can create, right? And SQL by itself is not scalable very easily. You'll have to make sure that your instance itself becomes bigger, which is an issue. And apart from this, Google does provide something called the cloud. I think it's called the one second. I think it's called the big table if I'm not wrong. So was the spanner? I'm not sure. So it's either the big table or the spanner, which is a traditional SQL database, but then it's horizontally scaled, which is a really cool thing. I don't think we are touching upon that either in this course, but feel free to explore it. I think Qwiklabs will have labs regarding those as well, and you should be able to perform those labs because you'll be having a monthly subscription only, which should be fine. So if you're interested in that, you can again look into it. It'll be a good learning experience. So I guess we can just, not restart, refresh. We can wait for this thing to, get connected so that we have a proper. And while that happens, we can actually start the next task, which also will take a lot of time. So the next task is to create a Kubernetes cluster, which again we have done previously in the last lab. So if you remember the command, it is just gcloud container clusters plural or create. Yeah, create, and we can call it Griffin dev as they have told us to. And let's just go to the next line for making sure we don't make mistakes. So what they have told us is we have to use the Griffin dev WP subnet. So before that, we'll have to mention the network as well. So our network will be Griffin dev VPC, and then our subnetwork. So subnetwork will be your Griffin dev WP, right? Network and subnetwork. And finally, they have told us to use a 2-node cluster, so we can also specify the num nodes parameter to 2, right? And finally, they have told us to use the US East 1B zone, so that also we can specify as zone as US East 1B. And the machine type that we want to use is N1 standard 4. So machine type is N1 standard 4. And yeah, I guess that should be it. All of the parameters that we were given have been taken into consideration, right? So we can just create this cluster, and this again will take a while because Kubernetes cluster is also a pretty complex operation. We can just wait for these two to execute in parallel and see what happens. Let me just refresh this page and try once, maybe. Yeah, so this will take a few minutes, might take up to like 5 minutes. Yeah, it's at 5 minutes already, so can take a while, and this command will also take a while, so it depends. So once that instance is created here in SQL, we'll have to SSH into the instance itself, and we'll have to do this SQL command. What it does is it creates a WordPress table, it grants permissions to WP user, and it makes sure that the privileges are refreshed by using this flush command. So let's just wait for this thing to get created, and we can, yeah, so we have been given a public IP, which means the instance is almost ready, I guess. So this might take a bit, and while I'm at it, let me just check my IP address. Okay, yeah, so one more thing is, if you guys are in college here, our HP network, which is provided by the computer support group, will not be able to SSH into different servers because that port is blocked. So you'll either have to use a VPN or you can connect your hotspot to perform the step. You'll not be able to do it in Wi-Fi. If you're at home, you can do it obviously. So I'll just connect to my VPN. Or we'll actually wait for this thing to complete so that I'm not messing up anything. Once it completes, I'll connect to the VPN and we'll SSH into the server. So similar to this firewall rule that is present where we allow TCP/22, our CSG has not done this, and hence, this port is blocked. We only have access to ports 80, 443 and 8080, I guess, where 80 and 8080 are for HTTP traffic and 443 is for HTTPS traffic. All other ports are blocked on our college Wi-Fi, so we won't be able to say use port 22 for SSH or anything of that sort. So yeah, so let's just wait for the cluster also to get created, because I don't want to interrupt this process in the middle, and once that's done, we'll continue with the process. Yeah, so our cluster is created. Let me just connect to my VPN. Connected, we can connect to our SQL instance. So how we do that is we use, as I said, the gcloud SQL command, and gcloud SQL has a command called connect, and you just specify the name of the instance that you just created, which in this case is Griffin dev DB. And once you specify that, just press enter, and it should prompt for your password in a bit. It will take a little bit of time, and then it'll tell you to enter your password. So we can wait for that. One second, I'm getting a call. Yeah, sorry guys, I'm back. I guess this thing has told me to enter my password. I entered it, but I'm not sure now. So ABCD 1 2 3 4 is what we set. Yeah, so we are connected to the MySQL connection. I'm unmuted, right? Yeah. So we are connected to the MySQL session, and here we can just paste these commands that have been given to us. And once we do this, we can again exit from MySQL as well. And once we do these commands, your SQL servers should have all of these databases, etc. created. So we can just check our progress once, and it should tell us assessment is completed. Yeah, perfect. So our assessment has been completed, and a Kubernetes cluster also we created, so that also should pass. So you can just check our progress. Yeah, that is also done. So finally, what we'll have to do is we'll have to prepare our Kubernetes cluster. How we do this is, if they tell us to first copy some files. So I think we used the command last class also called gsutil. What it is it's a wrapper over some certain commands which will help you to copy files, etc. from Google Cloud itself. So let me just go into a temporary folder. Yeah. So here we can use gsutil to copy this folder itself. So we'll use gsutil, and it's a normal Linux command. So -r, and we can paste the link that we want, the source that we want to copy from, and the destination. If we put dot, what it does is it takes it as the current folder that we are in. So if we just execute this command, we will be able to copy the files that we need. Right, there are 3 total files. So we have copied the files, and now we can go into the folder that we have copied it in, and if we do ls, we'll be able to see the 3 files that have been created. So over here, what they are telling us to do is that there are a few configuration stuff that we want to do. First, in WP-ENB is where you store all of your username, passwords, and so on. There, what we'll have to do is we'll have to make sure that we set the password to this WP user that we just created over here. So which has a username WP_user, which has a password stormwind_rules. So we can do that by just editing the file. So YAML. And if we go over here, there's a place for a username and a password as well. So the username is WP_user. And the password is stormwind_rules. Right. So we can close this file. So I've used Vim. You can use any text editor you want, VS Code, Nano, Notepad on Windows. It's totally up to you. And you'll be able to edit the file. You can just exit. And yeah, so once this is done, we can just prepare the Kubernetes cluster by, after we edit the thing, what we'll have to do is, as usual, we'll have to get the credentials for Kubernetes like we did last week. So it'll be gcloud container clusters get credentials and the name of the cluster that we made, which was Griffin Dev. Yeah, and we also need to specify the zone that we created it in, which is US East 1B. So we can just copy that as well. So once we do this, it should create the kubeconfig stuff for us so that we can use kubectl. And once we do this, we can use that to apply our env that we just edited. So kubectl apply -f specifies that you're applying it from a file, which is just wp-env that we just edited, env.yml, and if you press enter, it should apply the configuration that we did. And yeah, so this should have been created. So finally, there's this command that we need to execute to create a IAM account for our cluster, which is this IAM account and service email ID that you're providing. It will create an IAM account for us. It'll create a service account for us and create this key.json, which has the credentials. And then the second command, what it does is it creates it takes this key.json and applies it to our kubectl so that we get our account back. So if you see the command over here, it uses this thing called this $ Google Cloud Project. If you are using the Cloud Shell, this value will be set. But if you are not using the Cloud Shell like I am, you'll have to set this value manually. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to do export Sorry guys, did I just lose connection? I think I'm back now. If that's
Yeah,
fine.
for
Yeah.
15 minutes, 15 seconds. Sorry.
15 seconds. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you'll have to run this command called export Google Cloud Project equal to project ID if you want it. You don't run it in your Cloud Shell. If you're doing it locally, you'll have to run that command alone first. And then you can just again copy paste this, run this once, and it should, create the key as well as upload it to Kubernetes for you. So once we do this, we can again click on check my progress, and hopefully if we have done everything right, it should tell that it's completed. Please create a Cloud Sdk instance. Created a secret. Just give it a bit. It might take, you know, a while to recognize that we have done it. Yeah, it did create a secret. Okay, well, let's just wait for like 30 seconds or so and then check the progress, because it can take a while. Right. It is what it is. Yeah. So now it says assessment completed. So if this kubectl and etc. commands usually take a bit of time to execute, and once that's done, it's done. So finally, what we'll have to do is, if you noticed over here, there are two more files, which is wp deployment and wp service.yaml. We can just go into the files to, you know, see what they are. So the first one is a deployment that you create, which has containers, it has a version and so on. And the second one is a service which exports these deployments. So over here, we'll have to edit one thing alone in the deployment, which is this command, which has this variable called your SQL instance, which in our case, we'll have to replace it with our instance connections name. So what the instance connection name is basically the name of your instance itself. So if we go to this connection name, it's our project ID specified by the zone, and finally the name of the instance. So this name of the instance is the connection name, which is given dev db itself. So that itself we can use, and if we just change that, put given dev db there and save it again, we'll be done. And finally, we can create both our service and a deployment, similar to how we did this apply from file. So kubectl create from file. First, we'll have to create the deployment, and then we'll have to create the service. So yeah, so once these two are created, we'll have to wait for a bit again. We can do kubectl get services. Yeah, so it says external IP is pending. So until the external IP gets allocated, we will have to wait a bit. Only then, again, Qwiklabs will be able to make sure that we have actually, you know, created the thing. So let's just wait for that to happen. And once the external IP is created, we can check progress once, and that should be, you know, the end of the lab. So let me just check how much time that we have. Okay, so we have around 20 minutes left. You will be able to do this faster if you're not talking like I am, but yeah. So let's just see. Yeah, so we now have an external IP for the lab itself, and we can now say check progress, and it should tell us that we have completed the assessment. So yeah, so what we did was we created a Kubernetes cluster, and then we deployed WordPress on it. So finally, we'll have to enable monitoring and an uptime check for WordPress. We can do this right from the Google Cloud Console itself. All we'll have to do is first we'll have to get this IP address that we need, yeah, which is this IP that we want to, you know, do the uptime check on, that similar to what we did last week. And then what we'll have to do is there's a monitoring tab in this place, yeah, operations monitoring, and there's an uptime checks. Over here, we can create an uptime check that we want. Have they given us a name? No. So we can give any name that we want to use. So say Griffin. Okay, okay. Am I reconnected back? Yeah, cool. So we can create the uptime check that we want. We copy the IP address. So finally, we'll have to make sure that. So here the protocol is HTTP, and they have asked us, obviously, because we are, you know, hitting up a HTTP instance. The host name will be the endpoint that we copied from here, the external IP. And the path, you don't really have to specify the path because it'll be the default path, which is slash for us. So it's fine if you specify it, or if you don't, you can just specify it. And check frequency, everything else you can leave it at default values, right? Right, so we can just do this and we can create the uptime check. This can again take a bit of time, I guess. So yeah, so our uptime check is ready. We can check our progress once we get the assessment completed. And finally, we have to provide access to the additional engineer and make sure that they have the editor role to our project. So we can just copy the username 2 that we have been given, go to the IAM section, and yeah, we'll just have to add this other email ID that we have been given. Or is that email ID already there? Okay, this email ID is already here and they have a viewer role. So we can just change their role to a basic editor, which is what we want, and we can save it. So once this is saved, again, IAM can take up to 80 seconds to propagate. We can try checking the progress if it, yeah. So it says assessment is complete. So we have completed this challenge log successfully. Score is 100 out of 100. This was a kind of long lab, but it's fine. Right, so yeah, so that's about it, and we can end the lab as usual. And after ending, we can also delete the credentials that we just used. So, and once we do this, we'll be resetting everything to a clean slate. So yeah, guys, so that's about it for these two modules of the first track. And if we go to the second track, this ML and AI one, the challenge lab is actually pretty simple. If you would just see. So ML and AI it's aimed at data scientists and analysts, working with Google Cloud. So it's not very technical when it comes to it. You can do most of these things from the Google Cloud console itself. So things like create a simple data prop job, data flow job, data prep job, etc. are essentially just your, different labs which exist in the course itself. There's nothing extra from the lab which is, asked in the challenge lab. So you can directly do it. It shouldn't be an issue. So yeah, so first one is a simple data flow job. You'll have to create a BigQuery, a cloud bucket, and so on. Data prop similar, data prep again similar. Finally, the task 4, which is AI. Here they have given 3 tasks. You have to do any one task, and even for this task, it is very similar to the lab that you have. So over here you have 3 labs, which is your cloud natural language API is one lab, which is the second task over here. Your cloud speech API is one lab, which is the first task, and video intelligence is also another lab which is present over here. So all of the 3 are present in the labs itself, except I guess you'll be using a different data set from what was given. So you'll be using this file rather than your actual thing. And to copy this file, as we did over here, we used a command called gsutil-cp. So we can use the same command to copy the file and run whatever we want. And so if you see over here, I was saying, yeah. So for each of these labs, at the end of the lab, you'll be getting a result.json, right? In the lab, not the challenge lab. For the challenge lab, you'll just have to perform that one extra step of taking that result.json and uploading it to this bucket. Or yeah, there'll be this bucket called your project-marking, where your project is a project ID. And in the bucket, you'll have to just upload the file that you get, the result.json. You'll have to rename it to this and upload it, and you'll be able to pass the test. There's nothing complicated over here. You can do it if you have just completed the labs. But apart from that, if you have any doubts, you can ask me again or put in the Discord. We'll be happy to clear them. That shouldn't be an issue. And similarly, like I showed with BigQuery, most of this you would have done already. the first lab is just SQL statements that you'll have to execute. Like there'll be a table that you have been given, or more like a schema that you have been given. You'll just have to perform some SQL statements, joins, etc., so that you get a proper row that you have, right? This is very simple. Again, if you need solutions for these SQL statements, I can share them with you. I think I'll do that as well with the thing, but there's nothing to actually demo over here. Like it's just typing out the SQL statement and executing it. So yeah, you would be able to do that as well. Again, if any doubts, you can ask. So yeah, like I said, again, track 2 is a lot more, I don't know, straightforward than track 1, where there's no like, hidden stuff that you'll have to assume and do. Track 1, on the other hand, like we saw, like even simple things like zone and stuff, we'll have to make sure that we set properly. So yeah, that's about it, guys. So are there any questions, etc., that you have? We can go over them and hear them, or otherwise we can end the session as well.